This is Johnny, the chubby, Caucasian, Christian, closeted conservative. Some might say I'm everything wrong with the world, but don't take their word for it. Make up your own mind. Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Chubby, Caucasian, Christian, Closeted Conservative. One thing that's really important to me is for people to watch videos, news conferences, press conferences, speeches, and make their own opinion. We can get so wrapped up in what the media tells us, listening to different news sources, different media outlets, and just taking in the talking points that they give us. So I have my mom here with me today, and we are actually going to sit down and watch the second Joe Biden press conference together and make comments about it. This will probably be 2 episodes. Okay, so this is Joe Biden's second press conference. My mom and I, we know that this episode came out on the 19th, but the next day after would be his 1 year in office. So if we just have a little grace with us if we refer to it as 1 year. Former President Obama had 42 news conferences within his first year. So like I said, I got my mom here with me. Mom, one reason I wanted to do this with you was you had an interesting transition from being a more liberal, progressive Democrat to recently, well, how recent was it when you switched over to the Republican Party and did, in fact, vote for Donald Trump?
Yes, I did. I think the thing that really made me change was my husband a lot. He talked to me a lot about politics. In my home growing up, we didn't talk much about politics. We kind of had blinders on. And when I received Jesus as my Lord and Savior, I knew that I couldn't vote for a candidate that supported abortion and that they were just discarding all those unborn children. And even before that, when I was pregnant, I still thought abortion was okay until I saw my child's heartbeat. And that changed my life completely, even before I met Jesus. So that's pretty much in a nutshell. Plus, I don't like all the, wokeness that's going on now. I think I really steer away from that. It's very difficult for me to think that a man is competing with women because he identifies as a man. It's all upside down to me.
Yeah. So we're going to get started with the press conference, but there's a couple of things that I am looking for in this, Mom, and I want to hear your side of it as well. So I definitely want to hear him talk about packing the court. That was a big thing during his campaign. People talking about packing the court, and I hope that he touches on that here. We also want to hear about the border, what he's going to do with Russia and China, and our supply chain crisis. I doubt he's going to talk about the border because that's Kamala Harris's problem. In his last press conferences, what was it, 2 or 3 days before he made Kamala in charge of the border. That way he could go out and say, oh man, Kamala's she's awesome. She's the perfect person for this job. She's going to take it over. So Mom, I'm going to start this and I want to hear a little bit about what you want to hear from the President of the United States.
Hello, folks.
What do you want to hear about?
Thanks for being here.
The border.
Good afternoon, everyone.
The economy.
Tomorrow will mark 1 year.
The crime in the streets.
Yeah, crime.
A year of challenges, but it's also been a year of enormous progress. We went from 2 million people being vaccinated at the moment I was sworn in to 210 million Americans being fully vaccinated today. We created 6 million new jobs.
It's interesting when we talk about COVID, this Newsweek article, question number 4, this will be on my Facebook and on my Tumblr. Do you have a family member or close friend who has been hospitalized or died from COVID-19? According to this Newsweek article, 51.2% of individuals said no. So almost half of the people in this survey
actually got a raise. People, the bottom 40%, saw their income go up.
It's tough to talk about raises because the inflation is so bad. If 7% inflation, if you don't get more than a 7% raise this year, you're actually getting pay decrease.
You know those bills you get?
Everything in the store has gone up. Everything.
Everything.
Dollars from the hospital beyond what you thought you were going to have to owe because of the consultation you weren't told was going to cost that much? No more. They're now illegal. Thanks to the American Rescue Plan and other actions we've taken, we've seen record job creation, record economic growth in the past year.
Bringing jobs back after a pandemic is not creating jobs.
Yeah, I mean, so many people were out of work, plus they got the souped up unemployment. So, of course, they've gone back to work when that went away.
We'll be creating better jobs for millions of people, modernizing our roads, our bridges, our highways, our ports, our airports.
The Amtrak.
From making clean water, removing lead pipes, that every American can turn on a faucet and drink clean water. Urban and rural and suburban communities. It's going to make affordable high-speed internet available to every American. In urban.
I have to apologize for my audience. I just assume this man is just going to bumble, slur, just jumble up words all the time.
Still, for all this progress, I know there's a lot of frustration and fatigue in this country. And we know why. COVID-19.
You know, everybody's blaming everything on COVID. I work in the school system, and if kids don't do this, it's because of COVID. If teachers don't do this, it's because of COVID. If you eat a whole pie, it's because of COVID.
Yeah, Como blamed, the pandemic on God. Another thing, too, that we should have talked about is how much is he going to blame it on the former administration or on Trump? I mean, that's going to happen.
We wouldn't have a vaccine if it wasn't for Donald Trump and his administration.
To my audience and to President Joe Biden, there is another variant coming. It is called Deltacron. So please, maybe we can do some sort of Operation Warp Speed for mass monoclonal antibodies, vaccines, whatever the teachers union needs to go back to school. Let's Operation Warp Speed, stuff like that.
Down to 35 million with no shots as of today. And we're adding about 9 million more vaccinations each week. We're going to stick with our vaccination efforts because vaccinations work.
You know, the thing that really upsets me is people who are choosing not to get the vaccination are not getting the help that they need. And that's so unfair. It's so un-American. I mean, why do you have to get a shot, but if you get it, you don't get another choice? You know, they're all for choice when it's a baby. But this is,
test at a store, your insurance will reimburse you. On top of that, we're making 1 billion at-home tests available for you to order and be delivered to your home for free. Just visit covidtest.gov
now,
to know how to get.
They say these are not going to roll out till late January, maybe early February.
There are 20,000 sites where you can get tested in person for free now. And now, we have more treatments that people can, for people to keep people out of the hospital than any other point in the pandemic, including life-saving antiviral pills. We purchased 20 million of these new Pfizer pills, more than any country in the world. The bottom line on COVID-19 is that we're in a better place than we've been and have been thus far, clearly better than a year ago. We're not going
According to this Newsweek poll, 73.9% of people have received at least one dose of the COVID-19 vaccine. The question that I want someone to answer, someone from the left to answer, is what is herd immunity?
Funding for ventilation systems in schools, social distancing, hygiene for classrooms and the school buses. In addition, we've added another $10
I think we're going to have herd immunity with this, with the lesser variant. I mean,
definitely.
People I know that have been vaxxed and boosted, they've gotten it.
They've got
not only once, but twice. And in my school, we had about 8 people out one week because they all had it. And I think all of them but one had been vaxxed and boosted.
It's not going to go away immediately. But I'm not going to give up and accept things as they are now. Some people may call what's happening now the new normal. I call it a job not yet finished. It will get better.
This Newsweek article, question number 9. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Joe Biden is handling COVID-19? The most people strongly disapprove with the way that he has handled COVID-19 at 35.3%. The next highest one is somewhat approve, and that's at 26.6%. The lowest one is strongly approve at 18.6%.
People
the thing about COVID is that, they just ripped Trump apart.
Oh, ripped him apart.
But now he's in the same boat. I mean, it's a virus. People are still going to get it. And unfortunately, people are still going to do or without the vaccine.
Full employment.
And do I think that they're doing what they can? I hope so. Do I think Trump did? Yes.
Yes.
When he had all those CEOs and everything, I was so impressed and so proud. But you can't just blame one president for the same thing that's happening to this president.
Yeah.
The support that is now necessary. I respect the Fed's independence, and I've nominated 5 superb individuals to serve on the Federal Board of Governors, men and women from a variety of ideological perspectives. They're eminently qualified, historically diverse, and have earned bipartisan praise. And I call on the United States Senate to confirm them without any further delay. And here at the White House, and for my friends in Congress, the best thing to tackle high prices is a more productive economy with greater capacity to deliver goods and services to the American people. And a growing economy.
If he wants a more productive economy, why don't you open up the pipelines again?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, what planet is he on?
One of the things I love. Okay, global warming. To not argue. Let's just say all of us agree global warming is a thing. Greenhouse emissions. Okay, getting away from fossil fuels energy would help with that. Okay, we all agree on that. Okay, so we need to get away from fossil fuel energy. Let me ask you this question. If all of that is true, let's just say that we all agree on that. How does where it is being pumped matter?
So we acted. We brought together
exactly.
Does Mother Earth?
We're all on the same planet.
Is she like, all right, well, if you pump it in Russia, then, I'll create less, it'll be better than if you pump it in America.
My take on global warming is read the book of Revelation.
Yeah.
It's all going to burn.
It's going to happen.
The sun is going to fall. The stars are going to fall. It's all going to burn. So, of course, it's heating up.
Mm-hmm.
I often see empty shells being shown on television. 89% are full, which is only a few points below what it was before the pandemic. But our work's not done. My infrastructure
I'll have to find out where he got that number from.
Supercharge your effort upgrading everything from roads and bridges to ports and airports, railways and transit to make the economy move faster and reduce prices for families. Second thing, my Build Back Better plan will address the biggest cost of working families face every day. No other plan will do more to lower the cost for American families. It cuts the cost for childcare. Many families, including the people sitting in this room, if they have children and they're working full-time, many families pay up to $14,000 a year for childcare in big cities, less than that in smaller ones. My plan cuts that in half. That will not only be a game changer for so many families' budgets, but it will mean so much for the nearly 2 million women who've left the workforce during the pandemic.
So what's going to happen to the people who do childcare? Are they going to increase their price because people are getting more money? Or are they going to decrease? Are they going to increase it or decrease it? I mean, what does that look like?
Yeah. The one thing that scares me about this too is big government. Big government and communists and empires and stuff, they want to control you from cradle to grave. So if I give my child to them for an extra 2, 3, 4 years, and then hopefully they can get a nice government job with benefits and everything, then the government has them. The government would, especially if they went to a university, the government would have them for the first 25, 26 years of their life.
Right, and are they going to mandate where your child has to go? I mean, are they going to be teaching your child wokeness, and they are going to support that? You
Yeah.
know, I mean, it's a snowball effect.
Oh,
A
definitely.
handful of giant companies dominate the market in sectors like meat processing, railroad
Oh yeah,
shipping, and
big
other areas.
big meat.
This isn't a new issue.
I
It's
can't
not
get
been the reason
hamburger.
we've had high inflation today. It's not.
There was none on the shelf.
It's been happening for a decade. But over time, it has reduced competition, squeezed out small businesses and farmers, ranchers, and increased the price for consumers. We end up with an industry like the meat processing industry, where 4 big companies dominate the markets. Pay ranchers less for their cattle they grow, charge consumers more for beef, hamburger meat, whatever they're buying.
No. The reason prices are going through the roof is the price of gasoline. When truckers and everybody have to pay more for gasoline, have to pay more for energy, then everything costs more. A trucker is not going to take less money to drive the same thing to the same distance. Oh, yeah, sure. Gas prices went up 30 cents. Well, I'll just take a 30 cents an hour cut. That's not how it happens. When you raise the price of energy and gas and fuel, it raises the price of everything.
Challenges to our public health.
Has the government raised their mileage per mile when you work for the government? If you have to travel for the government, do you know if they've raised their?
No, I don't know.
By creating jobs at a record pace, now we need to get inflation under control. We have developed an extraordinarily effective booster shots and antiviral pills.
According to this Newsweek article, which do you think is the bigger problem facing the United States today? Inflation, unemployment, or COVID-19? The highest one is inflation with 45.4%. COVID is number 2 at 40.9%, and unemployment is 13.5%.
Still ahead of us, not behind us.
Which, if I was going to rate it like that, that would probably be the way my list as well.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know some of my colleagues will get into some specific issues, but I wanted to zoom out on your first year in office. Inflation is up. Your signature domestic legislation is.
Did he call on this guy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so.
Another thing, no one is ever going to ask him. No one's going to talk about Afghanistan. No one. No one's going to ask him about Afghanistan.
Americans every day, and the nation's divisions are just as raw as they were a year ago. Did you overpromise to the American public what you could achieve in your first year in office, and how do you plan to course correct going forward?
Absolutely.
Why are you such an optimist? Look, I didn't overpromise, but I have probably outperformed what anybody thought would happen. Fact of the matter is,
Outperformed. Mr.
Wow.
Unity.
we have made enormous progress. You mentioned the number of deaths from COVID. Well,
About the number of deaths from Afghanistan.
That's true.
It's coming down. Everything's changing. It's getting better. Look, I didn't overpromise, but I think if you take a look at what we've been able to do, you'd have to acknowledge we made enormous progress. But one of the things that I think is something that, one thing I haven't been able to do so far is get my Republican friends to get in the game of making things better in this country. For example,
that's bringing
I was
the country
reading the other
together,
day,
Joe.
Yeah.
I wrote the quote down so I don't misquote him. A quote from Senator Sununu when he decided that he wasn't going, Governor Sununu, when he decided he wasn't going to run for the Senate in New Hampshire. Here's what he said. They were all, for the most part, content with the speed at which they weren't doing anything. It was very clear that we just had to hold the line for 2 years. Okay, so I'm just going to be a roadblock for the next 2 years? That's not what I do, Sununu said.
Democrats don't want Republicans involved. Ask AOC. Do you think AOC wants Ted Cruz involved in any sort of policy making coming out of D.C. right now? No.
Didn't do anything in 2017 and 2018. And then he said, how the Republican Sununu spoke to answer the challenge? He said, crickets, yeah, crickets. They had no answer. I did not anticipate that there'd be such a stalwart effort to make sure that the most important thing was that President Biden didn't get anything done. Think about this.
Well, you did it to Trump. I mean,
What are they for? Name me one thing they're for.
Okay. I will tell you what Republicans are for. Republicans are for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In order to achieve those, we have to be strong on crime. We have to have jobs. I can't pursue happiness if I'm going to get robbed when I go around the corner, beat upside the head, or someone's going to break into my house. We are for peace through strength. We want the biggest, baddest military out there, not so we can go and blow things up, but because we can help those in need and make sure that people are not going to mess with us. I'm for equal rights. I'm not for equity. I'm for equal rights, everybody being treated equally. Those are the things that the Republican Party is about. We love each other. We want to help each other. We want to give everybody the opportunity to pursue happiness. The Democratic Party, they just want to give you whatever you want. They want you to stand in line and drink the punch. That is what they want from you.
I also want the Constitution followed.
Yes, we want the Constitution upheld. We want laws applied equally.
And I would like, when you're going to choose a running mate, you don't say they're going to be, an African American or have a different skin color and sex.
Yes.
If I did that when I was hiring someone, and I used to hire people all the time, and if I sat at my desk and said, I'm only going to hire an African American woman, I'm only going to hire an African American man, I'm only going to hire a white man. Now that sounds bad. I'm only going to hire a white woman. That is discrimination.
Yes.
And you can't put it any other way. That is discrimination.
Yes. It's racism. Racism and sexism.
It is. It is.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely is.
This Newsweek survey. Do you approve or disapprove of the way Joe Biden is handling his job as president? The highest one is strongly disapprove at 38%. Strongly approve is at 15.3%. The next highest one would be somewhat approve at 26%. So, people just don't agree with the way he's doing it. And the question that I would love to ask him after hearing that would be, what are the Democrats for?
Happens what I have to do.
That's a great question.
And the change in tactic, if you will.
The only thing good about his presidency is that Jimmy Carter's still alive to see it. Because he had such poor ratings, and everything he handled kind of crumbled. Even though he's a good guy, he builds houses for the poor. He's an upstanding Christian man. His presidency wasn't the best, and I'm glad he's still alive to see this.
Your campaign, and I wasn't in office anymore. We went in a whole bunch of districts campaigning for Democrats and Republican districts who said they wanted to do away with health care, with Obamacare. And I started pointing out that if you did that, pre-existing conditions would no longer be covered.
Yeah, that's not true. We want pre-existing conditions covered.
We didn't know that. And guess what? We won over 38 seats. Because we had explained to the people exactly what, in fact, had passed. Now, one of the things that I remember saying, and I'll end this, I remember saying to President Obama when he passed the Affordable Care Act, I said, you ought to take a victory lap. And he said, there's so many things going on, we don't have time to take a victory lap. As a consequence, no one knew what the detail of the legislation was. They don't know a lot of the detail of what we passed. So the difference is, I'm going to be out on the road a lot, making the case around the country with my colleagues who are up for re-election and others.
Yeah, you're going to be out on the road campaigning because it's an election year. And from what I have read, everything, I don't want to call anything for granted, but from what I have heard, what I've read, the polls I've seen, there's going to be a red wave in Congress. And that is what he's talking about. It's an election year. I'm not going to buy this. He is
a great help to me in the campaign in South Carolina. And Jim said, and when he endorsed me, and there was a clip on television in the last couple of days of Jim, and it said that we want to make things accessible and affordable for all Americans. That's health care. That's education. That's prescription drugs. That's making sure you have access all the things that everybody else has. We can afford to do that. We can't afford not to do it. So I tell my
I had a friend that went on the exchange for their health care, and when tax season came, they owed over $12,000 because it is a tax. they ask you if you're in it, and they were, and it was cheap during the year, but then when tax season hit, they had to pay.
Right now, your top two legislative priorities, your social spending package and voting rights legislation, are stalled, blocked by your own party after months of negotiation. You are only guaranteed control of Washington for one more year before the midterms. Do you need to be more realistic and scale down these priorities in order to get something passed?
Yes.
No, I don't think so. When you say more realistic, I think it's extremely realistic to say to people, because let me back up. You all really know the politics of this country and your networks and others. You spend a lot of time, which I'm glad you do, polling this data, determining what the American people's attitudes are, et cetera. American people overwhelmingly agree with me on prescription drugs. They overwhelmingly agree with me on the cost of education. They overwhelmingly agree with me on...
That is not true. According to this Newsweek article, this article is on my Facebook and Tumblr account. Question 17. If the election of the U.S. Congress in your district would held today, which of the following candidates would you most likely vote for? The highest one at 45.2% is the Republican candidate. The Democratic candidate is at 39.7% with a margin of error of 3%.
That I think is we're going to have to do is just make the case. I don't think there's anything unrealistic about what we're asking. I'm not asking for castles in the sky. I'm asking for practical things the American people have been asking for a long time. A long time. And I think we can get it done.
You're not going to scale down any of these priorities, but so far that strategy isn't working. You haven't been able to get some of these big legislative ticket items done.
I got two real big ones done, bigger than any president has ever gotten in the first term.
But currently, Mr. President, your spending package, voting rights legislation, they're not going anywhere. So
that's true.
Is there anything that you are confident you can get signed into law before the midterm elections?
Yes, I'm confident we can get pieces, big chunks of the Build Back Better law signed into law. And I'm confident that we can take the case to the American people that the people they should be voting for who are going to oversee whether the elections, in fact, are legit or not, should not be those who are being put up by the Republicans.
No, you can't say that.
That they're going to be
You'll be
able to
taken off
change the outcome of the
Facebook.
election.
You'll be taken
Change
off
the outcome of an
Whether or not
election.
we can actually get the election. And by the way, I haven't given up. We haven't finished the vote yet on what's going on voting rights and the John Lewis bill and others. But so, look, this is. I've been engaged a long time in public policy, and
Too long.
I don't know many things that have been done in one fell swoop. And so I think the most important thing to do is try to inform, not educate, inform the public of what's at stake in stark terms, and let them make judgments and let them know who's for them and who's against them, who's there and who's not there.
Mr. Unity.
Make that the case. And that's what I'm going to be spending my time
So
doing.
the voting rights thing, that
You mentioned Republicans
circles the showing your ID, right?
Yes.
On voting rights, for instance.
So I have a lot of African American friends, a lot of Latino friends. If I said to them, do you have problems voting? They would think I'm crazy.
On the same page in my party on this score. And I didn't call many Republicans at all. The fact is that I do think that Mitt is a serious guy. I think we can get things done. I think I predict to you they'll get something done on the electoral reform side of this. But rather than judge what's going to get done and not get done, all I can say is I'm going to continue to make the case why it's so important to not turn the electoral process over to political persons who are set up deliberately to change the outcome.
Whoa.
Wow.
Wow.
Harris,
If I would have said that about the 2020
Thank you, Mr.
election,
President. Speaking of voting
everything,
rights
all my
legislation,
page would have been
if
taken
it's
down,
passed,
YouTube video would have
do
been
you still
taken down,
believe
everything.
The upcoming election will be fairly conducted and its results will be legitimate.
Ooh.
Well, it all depends on whether or not we're able to make the case to the American people that some of this is being set up to try to alter the outcome of the election.
You can't do that.
One
Are you,
thing-
you can't. He should not be allowed to question the outcome of an election that has not taken
Remember
place.
how we thought not that many people were going to show up to vote in the middle of a pandemic? We had the highest voter turnout in the history of the United States of America. Well, I think if, in fact, no matter how hard they make it for minorities to vote, I think you're going to see them willing to stand in line and defy the attempt to keep them from
They.
I think you're going to see the people we're trying to keep from being able to show up, showing up
Again,
and making
if I asked my minority friends, and I'm a minority, I'm a woman,
Yes.
are you having problems voting because you're minority? They would look at me like I had 8 heads.
But we're not there yet. We've not run out of options yet, and we'll see how this moves.
And on Omicron and education, teachers are in revolt in so many places. Parents are at odds over closing schools and remote learning. You say we're not going to go back to closing schools. You said that just moments ago, yet they're closing in some areas. What do you say to those teachers and principals and parents about school closings, and what can your administration do to help make up for learning loss for students?
First of all,
that's a
I
good
put
question.
in perspective the question you asked. Very few schools are closing. Over 95% are still open. So you all phrase the questions when people, I don't think it's deliberate on your part, but you phrase the question when anyone watches this on television. My God, there must be, all those schools must be closing. What are we going to do? 95% are still open.
I love it when he whispers.
Number two,
Why does he whisper?
the idea that parents don't think it's important for their children to be in school, and teachers know it as well. That's why we made sure that we had the ability to provide the funding through the Recovery Act, through the act that the first act we passed, to be able to make sure schools were able to be safe. So we have new ventilation systems available for them. We have the way they scrub down laboratories and I mean the laboratories.
It's just a shame this generation. I really feel like my generation and my son's generation, the kids who are missing are going to miss 3 or 4 years of good education. Whatever he says, they missed at least 1 year of education. They are going to be reliant on my generation and the generation under them because I really think they're not going to develop well. And studies have shown that individuals with disabilities don't do well virtual learning. My wife is a teacher. My wife has a lot of teacher friends. When I have asked them, do you think someone would have went in once a week over the weekend, maybe to just people could come in who needed extra help? Could you get a teacher or a handful of teachers to do that? Everybody said yes.
98% of the schools in America are.
I work in the schools too, and I see kids who have anxiety issues, and them staying home has just played into those anxieties. And then when they're asked to come back, they just can't because they're so anxious. And it's sad. It's very sad. It interferes with every part of their life.
But there's still little unity among European allies about what a package of sanctions against Moscow would look like. If the U.S. and NATO aren't willing to put troops on the line to defend Ukraine and American allies can't agree on a sanctions package, hasn't the U.S. and the West lost nearly all of its leverage over Vladimir Putin? And given how ineffective sanctions have been in deterring Putin in the past, why should the threat of new sanctions give him pause?
Well, because he's never seen sanctions like the ones I promised will be imposed if he moves, number one.
Then why did you approve his pipeline?
A situation where Vladimir Putin is about to, we've had very frank discussions, Vladimir Putin and I, and the idea that NATO is not going to be united, I don't buy. I've spoken to every major NATO leader. We've had the NATO-Russian summit. We've had the OSCE has met, et cetera. And so I think what you're going to see is that Russia will be held accountable.
As soon as Joe Biden became president, it's so apparent how much the world needs a strong America. And for America to be strong, we need a strong commander-in-chief.
It is going to be
Putin and Xi Jinping feared Trump. They were like, this man is just a little crazy enough where if we say the wrong thing, he might just, here, give me that nuclear football.
And,
Well, see, and I don't see who would want to help us. I mean, we lead people that have helped
in
us.
Afghanistan.
Yeah, I mean,
And Putin's putting troops in Ukraine. Now, a lot of people think he's bluffing. I don't think he's bluffing. I think he's waiting after the Olympics because him and China are in cahoots. And I think once the Olympics are over, China's going to talk about Taiwan and Putin's going to move into Ukraine.
it's going to be consequential. In addition to that,
If he was smart, we would send a undercover team to go over there, Nord Stream 2, and blow the pipeline up.
for example, everybody talks about how Russia has control over the energy supply that Europe absorbs. Well, guess what? That money that they earn from that
Russia's economy is very dependent on the West. China, not so much. In China, they're more openly communist. They would be fine. But Russia, we could bring Putin to his knees if we started outproducing oil, found a cheap way to get it to our European allies and Germany so that they didn't have to buy oil from Putin.
concern on the part of
Joe Biden has made Putin rich again.
the last thing that Russia needs is Finland deciding to change its status. They didn't say they're going to do that, but they're talking about what, in fact, is going on and how outrageous Russia is being. We're finding ourselves in a position where I believe you'll see that there'll be severe.
That's another thing, too. I think Democrats and liberal Larrys and my progressive friends really lose track of is that they get so much involved with the domestic identity politics that they really lose sight of foreign affairs. They're just so consumed with identity politics, race, gender, transgender, who can compete in what and do whatever, abortion and not, that it's no wonder that they can't handle foreign policies.
And the direct conversation.
Especially with hostile actors like Putin, who could really care less what happens to his citizens.
But the price has been extremely high. How long? You can go in and, over time, at great loss and economic loss, go in and occupy Ukraine. But how many years? 1, 3, 5, 10? What is that going to take? What toll does that take? It's real. It's consequential. So this is not all just a cakewalk for Russia. Militarily, they have overwhelming superiority as it relates to Ukraine. But they'll pay a stiff price immediately, near term, medium term, and long term if they do it.
Please give us some specifics. What are you going to do?
exactly.
Okay.
Calling someone
David
else.
Sanger, New York Times.
If Trump did that, can you imagine if Trump called on...
President, I wanted to follow up on your answer there about Russia and Ukraine. When you were in Geneva in June, you said to us about President Putin, I think the last thing he wants now is a Cold War. Now, since then, of course, you've seen him gather these troops, 100,000 troops around Ukraine. Your Secretary of State said today he thought he could invade it at any moment. You've seen the cyber attacks, and you've seen the demand that he have a sphere of influence in which you would withdraw all American troops and nuclear weapons from what used to be the Soviet bloc. So I'm wondering if you still think that the last thing he wants is a Cold War. And has your view of him changed in the past few months?
That's a great question.
And if it has, and he does invade, would your posture be to really move back to the kind of containment policy that you saw so often when you were still in the Senate?
The answer is that I think he still does not want any full-blown war, number one. Number two, do I think he'll test the West, test the United States and NATO as significantly as he can? Yes, I think he will. But I think he'll pay a serious...
And if he doesn't get any pushback, he's going to go further and further and further.
It's going to cost him. And I think he'll regret having done it. Now,
This just reminds me of our border and how we are being invaded, but they don't have tanks. They don't have, I guess they don't have guns, who knows? But they have drugs. They have trafficking our youth.
is dealing with
We are being invaded
Guns.
too.
Yeah.
Guns. The fentanyl is crazy. They're dropping these people off everywhere, all over the country, at God knows when, at night, early morning. Jen Psaki.
They're early morning flights.
Yeah, they're bussing them. But we're being invaded as well.
Where he has a lot of oil and gas, but he is trying to find his place in the world between China and the West. And so I'm not so sure that he has.
Ooh, little brain fart there, Joey.
David, I'm not so sure he is certain what he's going to do.
34 minutes. He did really well for like 34 minutes, and now whatever pills or that nap, it's starting to wear off.
The two things he said to me that he wants guarantees on. One is Ukraine will never be part of NATO. And two, that NATO there will not be strategic weapons stationed in Ukraine. Well, we can work out something on the second piece, pretending what he does along the Russian line as well, the Russian border and the European area of Russia. On the first piece, we have a number of treaties internationally and in Europe that suggest that you get to choose who you want to be with. But the likelihood that Ukraine is going to join NATO in the near term is not very likely, based on much more work they have to do in terms of democracy and a few other things going on there, and whether or not the major allies in the West would vote to bring Ukraine in right now. So there's room to work if he wants to do that. But I think, as usual, he is going to. Well, I probably shouldn't go any further.
Yeah.
I think it will hurt him badly.
Like you were offering some way out here, some off-ramp, and it sounds like what it is at least an informal assurance.
Who's
that
giving the
NATO
press conference?
is
You're
not
supposed to
gonna,
be asking a question.
In Ukraine anytime in the next few decades, and it sounds like you're saying we would never put
Trying to
nuclear
explain to
weapons
him what he
there.
said.
He also wants us to move all of our nuclear weapons out of Europe and not have troops rotating through the old Soviet bloc. Do you think there's space for there as well?
No, there's not space for that. We won't permanently station, but the idea we're going to actually increase troop presence in Poland or Romania, et cetera, if in fact he moves. Because we have a sacred obligation in Article 5 to defend those countries. They are part of NATO. We don't have that obligation relative to Ukraine, although we have great concern about what happens in Ukraine. Thank you. Maureen, USA Today.
I can't believe they let him get away with calling.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to follow up on your comment on Build Back Better and also ask you a question about the pandemic. You said that you're confident you can pass big chunks of Build Back Better this year. Does that wording mean that you are thinking about, you're looking at breaking the package up into individual portions? And then on the pandemic, now that the Supreme Court has blocked the vaccination or test rule for larger businesses,
Supreme Court.
are you reconsidering whether to require vaccines for domestic flights as a way to boost vaccination rates?
No, look, first of all, on the last part of the question, the Supreme Court decision, I think, was a mistake, but you still see thousands and thousands of people who work for major corporations having to be tested as a consequence of the decision made by the corporation, not by the standard.
What about people who have underlying conditions, are sick, are allergic to stuff in the vaccine? What about individuals who can't get the vaccine?
You're confident
Yes.
that major chunks of Build Back
Yes.
Better can pass. Are you breaking it up? Does that
Yes,
mean-
it's clear to me that that we're going to have to probably break it up. I think that we can get, and I've been talking to a number of my colleagues on the Hill, I think it's clear that we would be able to get support for the $500+ billion for energy and the environmental issues that are there, number one. Number two, I know that the two people who've opposed, on the Democratic side at least, support a number of the things that are in there. For example, Joe Manchin strongly supports early education, 3 and 4 years of age, strongly supports that. There is strong support for, I think, a number of the way in which to pay for these, pay for this proposal. So I think there is. I'm not going to negotiate against myself as to what should and shouldn't be in it.
I'm surprised he's not going into the filibuster here.
The package up, get as much as we can now, and come back and fight for the rest later. Ken.
Oh my God! Can you imagine if they let Trump call on reporters?
As you said earlier, Americans are feeling the squeeze of inflation. Oil prices have been at about a 7-year high recently. How long should Americans expect to face higher prices when they're at the grocery store?
As long as the pipeline is closed down.
We're going to see into the summer, into next fall. And separately, you talk about the importance of the Fed.
And if he starts putting sanctions on Russia and everything, and they're not pumping as much oil, we are going to be in trouble.
You're unable to get a Build Back Better proposal through.
They've seen exactly what he's done to our country, and they're going to play into it.
Well, look,
for their good.
As you know, Ken, the inflation has everything to do with the supply chain. And I think what you're seeing is that we've been able to make progress on
He's going to blame it on COVID.
The access to materials. For example, 1/3 of the increase in cost of living is the cost of automobiles. The reason automobiles have skyrocketed in price is because of the lack of computer chips. So we have the capacity, and we're going to do everything in our power to do it, to become self-reliant on the computer.
And why do we lack computer chips?
In order to be able to produce more automobiles. That's underway. We've already passed.
Are they out in the sea somewhere on a boat, on a ship?
Money for that in the House of Representatives, before the House of Representatives now. But I think there's a way we can move to, if we can move to get, for example, that one thing done, it can make a big difference in terms of the cost of, the total cost of living. Now, with regard to the whole issue of energy prices, that gets a little more.
When you artificially decrease the supply of energy, the price of it is going to increase, supply and demand.
To go into their version of their petroleum reserve, to release more into the market, so that brought down the price about 12, 15 cents a gallon. Some places more. There's going to be a reckoning along the line here as to whether or not we're going to continue to see oil prices continue to go up in ways that are going up now, relative to what impact that's going to have on the producers. And so it's going to be hard. I think that's the place where most middle-class people, working-class people get hit the most. They pull up to a pump, and all of a sudden, instead of paying $2.40
again.
And
I mean, he closed down the pipelines. I mean, come on.
And now you're going to sit here and beg OPEC and Putin to pump more, people who hate us, to pump more oil. Now, one thing I will never forget is Thanksgiving. Jen Psaki talked about a 20-pound turkey costing $1 more. You know, that might not seem a lot of money, $1 more, but then, you know, you go buy potatoes, you're paying $1 more, you're buying butter, $1 more, rolls. I mean, let's just say you bought 20 items, that's $20 more. That might not be a lot of money to Mr. President, but to me, 20 extra bucks at the grocery store, I mean, that's a lot of money.
It is. I saved my receipts, and it's gone up. Everything has gone up at least 50 cents to $1, everything.
So you're going to see more and more, we're going to move on this competition piece to allow more and more smaller operations to come in and be able to engage in buying and providing the access to much cheaper meat than exists now. But it's going to be a haul. Now, and I assume the reason you said if I can't get Build Back Better relates to what those 17 Nobel laureate economists said, that if in fact we could pass it, it would actually lower the impact on inflation, reduce inflation over time, et cetera. So there's a lot we have to do. It's not going to be easy, but I think we can get it done. But it's going to be painful for a lot of people in the meantime. That's why the single best way to take the burden off middle class and working class folks is to pass the Build Back Better.
No. The way to do that is allow the individuals who were pumping oil before to give them free reign. There are people begging to get back to working on the pipeline, searching for oil, pumping oil, people who wanted it. These are good, high-paying jobs.
Or child care and the like. I think most people would make the trade. Their bottom line would be better in middle-class households. But it's going to be hard, and it's going to take a lot of work.
Sir, you mentioned China. Do you think the time has come to begin lifting some of the tariffs on Chinese imports, or is there a need for China to make due on some of its commitments in the Phase 1 agreement? Some business groups would like you to begin lifting up those tariffs on China.
Well, I know that, and that's why my trade rep is working on that right now. The answer is uncertain. It's uncertain. I'd like to be able to be in a position where I can say they're meeting the commitments, more of their commitments, and be able to lift some of it. But we're not there yet.
I cannot believe there's not going to be an investigation into
the
coronavirus.
origin of yes.
Right. I just cannot believe
Senate
it.
Minority Leader
I mean,
Mitch McConnell said that the midterm elections are going to be a report card on your progress on inflation, border security, and standing up to Russia. Do you think that that's a fair way to look at it? And if so, how do you think that report card looks right now?
I think report cards.
I don't think it's just a report card on him. I think it's a report card on the Democratic Party as a whole.
Mitch has been very clear. He's doing anything to prevent.
and you know, the vaccine mandates, they're letting people over our borders every day that haven't had
that aren't
vaccinated, that aren't tested, nothing.
Objective. Make sure that there's nothing I do that makes me look good in the mind, in his mind, with the public at large. And that's okay. I'm a big boy. I've been here before. But the fact is that I think that I'm happy to debate and have a referendum on how I handle the economy, whether or not I've made progress on. Look, again, how can I'm taking too long answering your questions. I apologize.
This Newsweek poll, question 18. Would you say you are better or worse off financially than you were about a year ago? 40.4% of individuals said worse off. 19.5% said better off. Neither better or worse is the other 39.9%.
Russia. It's different than I'm proposing that many of his Republican friends or his colleagues are supporting as well. What's he for on these things? What are they for? So everything's a choice. A choice. I think look, I've laid out a proposal on immigration that if we passed it, we'd be in a totally different place right now. But we're not there because we don't have a single Republican vote. My buddy John McCain's gone. So, I mean, it's going to take time. And again, I go back to Governor Sununu's quote. How long? I mean, rhetorical question. I know this is not fair to ask the press a question. I'm not asking you. But think about it. Did you ever think that one man out of office could intimidate an entire party where they're unwilling to take any vote contrary to what he thinks should be taken for fear of being defeated in a primary? I've had 5 Republican senators.
And Democrats didn't bend the knee to you or Obama at all. If you were against anything Obama was, you were racist.
Whatever I'm talking about for them to do. But Joe, if I do it, I'm going to defeat it in a primary. We got to break that. It's got to change. And I doubt you're all, sounds like I'm being solicitous, you're all bright as hell, well-informed, more informed than any group of people in America. But did any of you think that you get to a point where not a single Republican would diverge on a major issue? Not one.
You know, in my life, when I've made decisions
Anyway.
and the majority of people didn't think it was a good one,
Sure.
whether they were friends or acquaintances or whatever,
Yeah,
don't you kind of question what you're trying to do?
I have a
Voting rights, sir.
liberal
I
area in my
love
Bible
this
study.
conference 10 months ago. I
Hates Donald Trump. Absolutely hates Donald Trump. The best part about it is his parents love Donald Trump and his in-laws love Donald Trump. My question to him was, does the opinion of your elders, does that matter to you at all? These individuals who have lived longer than you, who raised you, who brought you into the world, who raised your wife, does their opinion change you? And, you know, does it affect you at all?
No, because the hate for Trump supersedes anything.
Supersedes that, yes.
It even supersedes common sense.
Number of enforcers in the Justice Department who are there to challenge these unconstitutional efforts, in our view, unconstitutional efforts on the part of the Republicans to stack the election and subvert the outcomes.
Subvert the outcomes. You can't question elections.
Community to make the case to the rest of the American people what's about to happen, what will happen if, in fact, these things move forward. If I had talked to you, not you, I'm using you in an sense.
I would encourage everybody to look at the voting laws in Georgia.
Subversion of elections by deciding who the electors are after the fact, I think people would have looked at me like, whoa. I mean, I taught constitutional law for 20 years, a 3-credit course in separation of powers, and on Saturday mornings when I was a senator. And I never thought we'd get into a place where we were talking about being able actually, what they tried to do this last time out, send different electors to the state legislative bodies to represent who won the election, saying that I didn't win, but Republican candidate won. I doubt whether anybody thought that would ever happen in America in the 21st century, but it's happening. And so I guess what I'm saying is, Nancy, is that I think that there are a number of things we can do, but I also think we will be able to get significant pieces of the legislation, if we don't get it all now, to build to get it so that we get a big chunk of the John Lewis legislation as well as the fair elections.
Sir, on COVID, if you don't mind, you touted the number of Americans who are now fully vaccinated with 2 shots, but even some of your own medical advisors say that people aren't fully protected unless they have that 3rd shot, a booster. Why hasn't this White House changed the definition of fully vaccinated to include that 3rd booster shot? Is it because the numbers of fully vaccinated Americans would suddenly look a lot less impressive?
No, it's not that at all. It's just this has become clearer and clearer. And every time I speak of it, I say, if you've been vaccinated, get your booster shot. Everybody get the booster shot. It's the optimum protection you can have.
According to this Newsweek poll, question 6A, thinking about your COVID vaccination, which of the following statements describes you best? I'm fully vaccinated, 2 doses of Pfizer or Moderna, or 1 dose of Johnson & Johnson, 43%. I'm fully vaccinated and have received a booster. That's 49.9%. I'm partially vaccinated at 7%.
It's all part of the same thing. You're better protected. Okay, Alex Alper, Reuters.
I just can't believe they let him call on.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to follow up briefly on a question asked by Bloomberg. You said that Russia would be held accountable if it invades, and it depends on what it does. It's one thing if it's a minor incursion, and we end up having to fight about what to do and what not to do. Are you saying that a minor incursion by Russia into Ukrainian territory would not lead to the sanctions that you have threatened? Or are you
why don't you just tell Putin, you could take a little bit of Ukraine over?
The country?
Good question. That's how it did sound like, didn't it? The most important thing to do, big nations can't bluff, number 1. Number 2, the idea that we would do anything to split NATO, which would have a profound impact on one of I think, profound impact on one of Putin's objectives is to weaken NATO would be a big mistake. So the question is, if it's something significantly short of a significant invasion, or not even significant, just major military forces coming across. For example, it's one thing to determine that if they continue to use cyber efforts, well, we can respond the same way with cyber. They have FSB people in Ukraine now trying to undermine the solidarity within Ukraine about Russia and to try to promote Russian interest. But it's very important that we keep everyone in NATO on the same page. And that's what I'm spending a lot of time doing. And there are differences. There are differences in NATO as to what countries are willing to do depending on what happens, the degree to which they're able to go. And I want to be clear with you. The serious imposition of sanctions relative to dollar transactions and other things are things that are going to have a negative impact on the United States, as well as a negative impact on the economies of Europe as well, a devastating impact on Russia. And so I got to make sure everybody's on the same page as we move along. I think we will if there's something where there's Russian forces crossing the border, killing.
This Newsweek poll. Question 15. Which of the following do you think is the bigger threat to the United States today? 45.9% believe China. Russia is 15.3%.
I just wanted to get your sense of whether the Vienna talks are making any progress, if you still think it's possible to reach a deal for both sides to resume compliance with the Iran nuclear deal.
Did he really answer the question there?
Do it in reverse.
I mean, that's like the United States being invaded and like, oh, if they take a little bit of California, it's we'll be fine. If they take a little bit of New York, well, it's okay. A little bit of Texas, Florida.
Very quickly on Russia, I do have a number of domestic policy issues, but on Russia, very quickly, it seemed like you said that you have assessed, you feel as though he will move in. Has this administration, have you determined whether President Putin plans to invade or move into Ukraine, as you said?
Is there anything that you have to say? Any comments you want to make, Mom, after that?
Everybody hated Trump or disliked when he was an authority. He was an authority figure. This world is falling further and further away from having any sort of accountability. And I wish that other leaders of other countries would think that we were authority, that we had that authority-ism, and I don't think we do with Biden and the administration.
No.
And I think his hands are tied with China because of Hunter.
Yep. I would love to see the dossier that China and Russia and Ukraine have on Hunter Biden. This family, I mean, the fact that they had business dealings over there, I mean, we can have that conversation about what that actually happened and ethics and morals and stuff like that. But we all have to find common ground that Hunter Biden did have business dealings in Ukraine, but he was a predominant character in Ukraine. If you look at that interview that he did, I think it was on ABC News, where he talked about what background, what experience do you have that shows that you're right for this job. He doesn't even speak the language. He doesn't even speak the language.
Yeah, and I think they have President Biden over a barrel in China and in Russia because of all those dealings. I just do. And we can't take the upper hand because of it.
Well, thank you, Mom, for joining me today. We still have a lot more of this press conference to get to, but it's just a lot to get to. We're going to break it up into two parts. I just want to encourage everybody on your own to go watch the press conference. Don't take someone's word for granted on what actually happened. I mean, you got to hear it right here, right now, today, him question the outcome of a future election, talk about our economy, things that he wants to pass, whether they're unconstitutional or not. Just all in all, a lot of interesting stuff, It's good to hear straight from the horse's mouth. please rate, like, comment, and subscribe. You can find me on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, trying to get my Rumble account going. You can also find me on Facebook and Tumblr. Just search the Chubby Caucasian Christian Closeted Conservative and look for my eagle. I had a family member paint that eagle, and I loved it so much that she gave me the original. She's very patriotic. She's having a tough time right now because of COVID and everything. If you could just head over to her Rumble account, I'm not asking you to buy anything. Just go over, check out some of her beautiful artwork. It's Robin N. Brown. That's Robin as the bird, N the letter, Brown the color. I want to thank you, everybody, for listening again today, and we will see you later.